Hello, guys, and welcome back. We are currently doing this podcast during free agency frenzy. So, if any free agency news strikes up while we do this podcast, we will let you know, even though this podcast will be pre recorded. But I'm here with Draftday 101 on his draft podcast, and today we'll do the second 8 picks, which is the Bills through the Cowboys. And we did our first 8 picks and draft day. Would you like to go over what those first 8 picks were?
Number one was the Texans taking Blake Bortles of UCF. Number two was the St. Louis Rams drafting Jadeveon Clowney, the defensive end out of South Carolina. The Jacksonville Jaguars drafted Johnny Manziel with the third pick. The fourth pick went to Sammy Watkins of the Cleveland Texas A&M. Sorry. The Raiders drafted Teddy Bridgewater, the quarterback from Louisville. The Atlanta Falcons took Greg Robinson, the offensive tackle from Auburn. The Buccaneers took Khalil Mack, outside linebacker from Buffalo. And the Vikings took Anthony Barr, from the outside linebacker from UCLA. While we're ready to pick with the Bills.
And breaking news today, Anthony Barr did run his 40, and at UCLA it was not hand timed, it was electronic, so it was official, and he did run a 4.44 at his pro day. And that is really great for him. He ran a 4.68 at the combine, I believe. So he helped improve his draft stock.
Yeah.
And
he actually did help him improve his draft stock, but the thing about the combine, I always say, is it's really a slow track because everywhere else people seem to run faster. It tells me something. It's like if everybody else is running faster at their own tracks, that obviously tells you something slower about the track in Indianapolis. I've always thought of that. So, but the thing about Indianapolis, it's everybody's running in a neutral track though. So even if it's a slow track, everybody's running in that track. So I keep the time in mind more in Indianapolis more so than in their own individual pro days.
right.
But overall, he did run a 4.45. It was a difference, but we already knew that Anthony Barr could run. We already knew he was athletic. He was playing H-back at UCLA for 2 years. We already know he was athletic.
Yep. And so let's get to it. The Buffalo Bills on the clock. Remember, this mock draft, these picks are based on what we think the thing can pick or is going to pick, but now free agency's hit. We may revisit this mock draft to do a quick one after we're all said and done with this first mock draft. Now that, some teams are going after, Jarius Bird is on the market that could change some picks up, and all these high-touted free agents, can change the draft scenario big time. But the Buffalo Bills are on the clock. What are the 3 biggest needs for this team?
The Buffalo Bills, obviously, they're in need of help at safety now that we already know that Jarius Bird is probably not going to be coming back. They're definitely in that need. They could also grab a wide receiver. Stevie Johnson, I've always seen him as a second wide receiver. So has a lot of people, and he played more so as a second wide receiver. So is Robert Woods. They have good wide receivers, but those guys all seem like they're second wide receivers. There's never been that one big-time wide receiver in Buffalo pretty much since Eric Moulds has left. That's quite a while ago.
Oh, yeah.
Terrell Owens was one, but it was really a short year, and it was a short experiment with him. But, there's good wide receivers on this team. They also need that position. Cornerback, they need depth in that position. They're pretty off at linebacker. That position is pretty weak. And if you really believe in Jerry Hughes for another year, outside of Mario Williams, you have Jerry Hughes, but you can get better pass rushers than Jerry Hughes. He might be a one-year wonder. Why wasn't he productive in Indianapolis? Because I'm always one of those guys that says just don't judge a guy after just 1 year in the NFL. Like Cameron Wembley, he had a successful career. Had a successful year, and then all of a sudden, pretty much majority of his career, he wasn't highly touted. He had one good year. Tennessee decides to pay him. It wasn't a success.
Right. So now let's get to the picks. Let's go with the first one, meaning who you think they're gonna go with, and the second one, who do you think they should go with?
The Buffalo Bills, I think that they should actually go for an offensive. I think that they will end up going with an offensive tackle to play opposite to Cordy Glenn, a right tackle, and a guy who actually did play right tackle, who has experience playing right tackle, Jake Matthews. It makes a lot of sense here. He's tall, he's a long, athletic guy, who kind of fits the mold. In most mock drafts at this point, he was usually gone at this point, but he's kind of slipping down a little bit because Taylor Lewan has been getting some buzz, and Ray Robinson has been getting buzz. He, on the other hand, he's just been solid, and everything he's made check marks, but it's just like those other two guys are a little bit more better athletes. In this postseason, I kind of expected him to have a little bit more of a drop off because he's not that tremendous of the amazing athlete. He's a good athlete and all, but he's not a tremendous athlete compared to those other tackles. I think Buffalo's going to end up, if they're able to grab a Jake Matthews here, a really good pick, because he would probably be able to play opposite to Cordy Glenn, because Cordy Glenn already has that left tackle. He struggled a little bit at points last year, but I think that he's good enough where you could put him at left tackle. He showed enough promise. He wasn't all world, but I think he has Pro Bowl potential, and you could have two bookend tackles, protect EJ Manuel, maybe for the next 10 years.
Right. And now who do you think they should go? Who do you think they should go with?
I would go with Mike Evans, because the goal for the Buffalo Bills has to be the number one goal outside of winning the Super Bowl is making sure that EJ Manuel is successful. At all costs, pretty much all costs, you have to make this guy work, because Buffalo, you haven't hit on quarterback for a while. Who was really the last successful long-term Buffalo quarterback? We're going back to Jim Kelly. I don't really remember Jim Kelly playing that much. I was a little kid.
But yeah,
the last time Jim Kelly, it's been a real long time since Buffalo has had that long-term quarterback. EJ Manuel has to be that guy for Buffalo. And the best way to do that is to give him as much weapons as possible. Give him Mike Evans, give him Robert Woods, give him Stevie Johnson. You've got yourself a core where you can't give him excuses, but you've given him every tool possible. You could also, I was also thinking of another guy you could have probably maybe fit in here. But if there would be more so maybe you trading back a couple of picks, it would be Eric Ebron, because they're also in need of a tight end.
Right. But I like the Mike Evans pick. I told a lot of people how this kid was good when he was at A&M, and he's a big receiver. People draw comparisons to Vincent Jackson and to the Brandon Marshall, but you need a receiver. He's big receiver. He can pick the ball off in the air, and he's very physical at that. And then, as seen at the 40-yard dash this year, he ran a 4.47, which a lot of people not expect him to run that fast.
And I went back and looked at the tape, man, because sometimes that maybe it shows up that it's not him trying to be physical at the line of scrimmage. Because we see a lot of wide receivers in college. The corners try to jam them, and they just shove them over, and they run free, or they can just catch all the contested passes in the world. It doesn't really translate to the NFL. In the NFL, you've got to be able to separate with your own either route running or your speed. Those two things are the things that always get wide receivers to separate. You've got to either be a good route runner or be there. There's freaks like Alshon Jeffries and stuff like that can catch any contested pass that you throw his way. But for the most part, it comes down to those things. And I started looking at Texas A&M, and I really did see the speed and how Alabama couldn't have had a hard time keeping up with this guy, and how he ended up 200 yards against Auburn. And those defenses weren't exactly awful. Those were top-tier competition. Those are the two games I went back and I looked, and I was like, Mike Evans, he does have that speed. It's not just manufactured.
Right. And I go back to my previous podcast. I told people if A&M was going to beat Alabama, it had to be through Mike Evans. And they went through him to the first half, and then Johnny Manziel didn't go to him as much in the second half, and his stats for the Alabama game was 7 catches, 279 yards. I didn't show his touchdowns there, but that's still Seven catches, 279. That's a lot right there, and I think he's going to be a great receiver. But let's go to the 10th pick, which is the Detroit Lions. What are their top 3 needs?
The Detroit Lions, obviously, they right now they're talking about grabbing another wide receiver in free agency, but we don't know exactly what guys they're going to pick up. They're going to need weapons. You also need help in the back end. Free safety. You also lost Louis Dalmas. They could address that, but that would probably be asking them to either move back or reach. And as far as a mock draft, we really can't do it. I'm not trying to do either. I can't obviously try to trade back. They also need help at corner. Darius Slay came in, but Chris Houston, he's been up and down most of his career, and Bill Bentley showed that he's really better suited for the nickel position. The linebackers have been a pretty weak core as of late. There's no running linebacker out there that you can really say. I mean, Stephen Tulloch, he was good in Tennessee, but he's not the same anymore. Ashley Palmer is not really a starter, and I'm trying to remember the other linebacker.
I know he played at Wisconsin. What's his name? DeAndre Levy.
DeAndre Levy, yes. He's up and down. He's been okay at times, but okay's not good enough to cut it down. Because if your other linebackers are pretty bad and you're just okay, it doesn't cut it either.
Right. So
they're pretty deep on the defensive line, but everything else on that defense, they pretty much can go any position on defense at this point. But right now, for sake's sake, I'm really going to try to stick with the offensive side for the Detroit Lions, though.
Right. So, who do you have? What do you predict the Detroit Lions are going with the 10th pick?
If everything falls according to my mock draft right now, Detroit would be ecstatic to still be seeing Mike Evans at 10. And I'd be hard to see them passing it up. I know everybody said Detroit just keeps drafting wide receivers. They drafted Calvin Johnson. They drafted Roy Williams, Mike Williams, Charles Rogers. They've drafted a lot of wide receivers in the first round. It's shown in their history. But outside of Calvin Johnson, you really don't have a passing game. You want to know why Matthew Stafford throws a lot of interceptions? He's forced to throw to Calvin Johnson almost all the time. And if he has bracket coverage, those other wide receivers can't win. It's shown over and over that why Matthew Stafford's struggling. He's either going to check down to Reggie Bush or he's going to go deep to Calvin Johnson. And if you gave him Mike Evans, could you imagine that freakish combo? You'd have Megatron and Megatron Jr. virtually with Mike Evans, Big Mike Evans, and Calvin Johnson. It would be an almost impossible game plan to do because who you're going to really double cover? It's gonna be almost a nightmare for them to try to
cover both of them.
Cover both of those guys. What do you think even on this?
I would think that Matthew Stafford will be a top 10 pick in fantasy football because of that. Because all kidding aside, yes, Matthew Stafford will make big strides with that, and if Detroit does not, progress, and they end up for some reason back in the top 10, anything can happen. But if all these players remain healthy, this is a very good outlook for Detroit.
Especially on offense. They still would have holes on defense, and you would still probably have to address that in a later round. But if you sit in there, you have Mike Evans and Calvin Johnson with all that height and speed. Another pick could have been Eric Ebron, but Joseph Fourier showed that he was one heck of a red zone threat.
Yeah, he was a very good red zone threat.
To a tight end.
Exactly. He's probably
every time tight end.
And then you have pretty much 3 red zone threats. You have Mike Evans, you have Calvin Johnson, and then you have Fourier. And they're all 6'5".
And don't forget about Jaquel Bell. He's a pretty powerful running back down there too. And all reports are saying that he's probably going to end up coming back as well too.
But if I'm the Detroit Lions, I'm being really happy with this. Defense hasn't always been there, but you have a very good defensive line. You just drafted Iggy Ansah last year. Your D tackles is probably, Dominican Sue, as dirty as he is, he's a very talented player.
And he's one of the best defensive tackles, if not the best defensive tackle.
Exactly. And then The only
And
other
Furley's not that far behind either.
exactly one of the best starting two defensive tackle combos in the league. But we don't know about the other defensive end because Willie Young is a free agent. But if I'm Detroit, I'm ecstatic about this that Mike Evans fell to 10. But let's go to Tennessee Titans are at the 11th spot. What are their three biggest needs this offseason?
The three biggest needs this offseason, they're going to have to address the linebacker position, especially the middle linebacker position. Zach Brown's been all right. Akeem Ayers has never really lived up to expectations. That's definitely probably their biggest hole is that middle linebacker position. They also need pass rushers. Cameron Wembley just was not worth the money that they ended up paying for him, considering his 1 year of good production. I mean, they kind of overpaid for Cameron Wembley. Derek Morgan, he still hasn't lived up to expectation. Their only true pass rusher, and it's really an inside line and defensive tackle, and it's former USC defensive tackle Jarrell Casey.
Yeah, he's really good there.
Yeah, he had 10 sacks, but he kind of went unnoticed because the rest of the guys weren't getting anything to go along with it.
And this team's also transitioning to a 3-4 defense, I believe.
Yeah, I think he can play the 5 technique, but they're going to have to also move around and try to address try to address also the secondary as well too in this defense as well.
Yeah, because
Zach Brown, the thing about it, like Zach Brown also will help him, but the thing I'm afraid is he might not actually fit this defense because he's a little undersized. He's more traditionally almost like a Tampa 2 corner. I mean, a linebacker. He's going to go out there. He's going to cover the flat. He's not designed in there to take in any blockers. Inside linebackers in on an odd front, they have to take on blockers a lot of the time.
Right. And also with Dalteron Werner gone, like you mentioned, cornerback could be a big time. They may look at that in this.
But they did address it a year ago though with Leroy Wilson.
Yeah.
Who I like, but I mean, we're still not a sure product here.
Yeah.
It's still not a sure product here.
So who do you have the Titans projected to draft at the 11th spot?
At number 11, I have them taking Justin Gilbert, the cornerback, because more so for safer reasons than other. I also thought that you could also go with a different position, but at the same time, corner is still a need at this point, and Justin Gilbert gives them that dynamic kick returner. They give them that man-to-man corner that's going to be able to cover the number one wide receiver, either Jason McCourty or Leroy Wilson. I mean, he's more suited to be a number 2 corner. Jason McCourty, maybe you move him to cornerback, to the inside corner, play nickel, more so than playing on upside. You move Leroy Wilson to the outside, and you got yourself a trio right there, and you're able to cover in the front end. You're still going to have to address pass rushers at a point, but this class doesn't have that dynamic pass rusher outside of Jadeveon Clowney. You have more so of a cover corner, and it's not as a deep class at cornerback as it usually is.
Right. And so with Justin Gilbert going to the Titans. Now, let's go to the Big Blue in New York Giants. They had a very disappointing season this year, but I've told everybody, listen, if you host the Super Bowl, just expect a disappointing season. So Cardinals fans, listen, if you're picking in the top 15, I am sorry, just don't host the Super Bowl. All right? That's all I got to say to you. Just don't host the Super Bowl if you don't want to have a bad year. But let's get to it. The Giants, what are their 3 biggest needs after picking here at 12?
I would say defensive tackle and offensive tackle are both needs. I wasn't a fan even last year of Justin Pugh. I rated Justin Pugh as a 4th round pick last year. Maybe a little too low considering that he started all those games, but I always think of Justin Pugh more so of a guard than a tackle. As a tackle, I give him a 4th round grade. As a guard, I give him more like a 3rd or 2nd round grade between that area.
Right, and also the biggest thing was he had short arms, right? I believe.
Short arms, and he played okay at times. He was serviceable, but he just wasn't what I wanted him to be as far as a tackle. And I really didn't think of him as a first rounder either. And William Beatty, that's an he also regressed last year. Eli Manning got beat up a lot last year. A lot of people say, well, Eli Manning was so awful. Maybe if he wasn't getting beat up as often, maybe if he was standing upright, he would have been able to get the ball to Randall Cobb and Victor Cruz and Hakeem Nicks. Now, even though, speaking of which, Hakeem Nicks, it brings me to my third need is probably a wide receiver because Hakeem Nicks is leaving probably most likely. And all reports are saying he's probably not coming back.
Right, and he did not have a single touchdown this past season, which is so they're looking to replace at wide receiver. So who do you have the Big Blue taking here at the 12th spot?
I don't see how if Taylor Lewan is here that they could possibly pass up on him. I mean, this is probably also what I would think that they would do. And I think this is what I expect them to do. Taylor Lewan, if he's sitting out here, it's blatant that they got to take this guy. It would allow Justin Pugh maybe to move the guard, William Beatty to move the right tackle. It addresses a few of their needs on the offensive line, and it builds competition and depth because they're going to address the offensive line through free agency, and they're going to address it through the draft. Either way, but it's gonna build depth, and depth in the offensive line is so important because you lose guys all the time. How often do you really see all 16 starters start all the games during the season? It doesn't happen that often.
It's very rare for even a core offensive line to stay together as long, for a whole season. So you need backup, you need depth.
Yeah, you need depth. And it would give them possibly that depth that they need at the offensive line, and they also would have that left tackle to protect Eli Manning for probably the next 4 or 5 years, depending on how long he's been productive as their New York Giants quarterback.
Right, and I think it'll be a great fit for them. I think they'll probably also be really happy that he's here at 12, and it fits a very good need, and I think Tom Coughlin will be happy. Eli Manning is going to be really happy to know that he also has somebody there to protect his blind side. Now let's go to the Rams, who host their second pick in the first round here at 13. And Rams haven't made any big free agency moves, so there's nothing change here. So what do you have the 3 biggest needs for the Rams?
The 3 biggest needs for the Rams, we kind of went through this already. So do you still want to recap it?
I think we said the big needs were safety, help, offensive line, and probably wide receiver, right?
Wide receivers probably, but wide receivers, I'm convinced that they probably should spend a first rounder on this one. Maybe not even a premium draft pick on this one because maybe a 4th rounder, but it is pushing it to keep drafting wide receiver over and over because you got to sit back and put yourself in the owner's place. Why do we keep drafting wide receivers every single year and when in the situation it's not changing? I mean, you addressed the Stedman Bailey in the 3rd round last year, Brian Quick in the 2nd round in 2012, Austin Pettis in the 3rd round in 2011.
Yeah.
2013, you drafted Tavon Austin. Why are we not getting this right? I mean, every year you're drafting wide receiver. I mean, it's a need, but at a point, you can't keep addressing it in an NFL draft. Maybe get yourself a veteran wide receiver out there because the coaching staff, it's either the coaching staff or it's the scouting department that's not doing their job.
Right. So, who do you have right here the Rams taking at the 13th spot?
At this point, they did lose an offensive tackle. They did lose
Roger
Saffield.
Yeah, he did sign with the Raiders today. He did play, and he was playing guard with them, and they did cut Harvey Dahl also.
Yeah, and this pick right here would also address because I did give the Rams Davion Clowney outside of conventional thinking. I would have expected them to have traded down at this point, but since there's no trades and such things, Jadeveon Clowney was already their 1st round draft pick. Now they can go on ahead and address that offensive line and draft Zach Martin. The thing about it is you paid Jake Long a lot of money a year ago. The logic behind this makes a little bit more sense than even drafting offensive linemen with that 1st draft pick. you could get possibly Zach Martin either to play guard or possibly tackle, depending on what the situation comes up in training camp, whether it's Joe Barksdale or not. Jake Long is also hasn't been able to stay healthy. If he's able to stay healthy and he's your franchise left tackle, by all means, Jake Long isn't that long. Isn't that old. He's only 28 years old. As far as left tackle, you probably have 2 or 3 more good years from him. You can go on ahead and address an offensive tackle position where you can possibly put him at guard, because I think Zach Martin could be a guard or a tackle. He gives you that versatility, and you need both.
Right. And now, the biggest probably change in the draft with the Chicago Bears because of their free agent signing today of Lamar Houston from the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah, and I actually had Aaron Donald marked up here, but I just quickly crossed that out as soon as I heard Chicago sign him, Lamar Houston.
Lamar Houston did play defensive end at the Raiders, but I think
the Raiders, I think he can play defensive end, but I think he's going to end up playing defensive tackle here as well too. There's a possibility he can end up playing defensive tackle, but if they was to play him a defensive end, it wouldn't hurt them as much, because the biggest problem for Chicago was they couldn't stop the run at any point.
Yeah.
If you turn back on that Philadelphia game, I still think that Coach Trestman is still having nightmares about how much LaShawn McCoy in that offense was just running all throughout them.
Oh yeah.
On that Sunday night.
But let's get to it. The Bears, the three biggest needs for them coming in, even after the signing.
Yeah, they lost. They're probably going to lose Charles Tillman. And through free agency, they're in need in the secondary. I don't see how they neglect the defensive side of the ball this year in the NFL draft. Lance Briggs, DJ Williams is coming back. They have pieces at linebacker, so linebacker doesn't look like it's as big as a whole, but defensive back and probably defensive line is probably pretty much still a need right here, because Julius Peppers is getting long in the tooth, and he's not as productive as he used to be. He's not probably as athletic, and probably doesn't have that same quick first step. So right here, I was able to really change my first round draft pick, and I gave him Calvin Poyer of the strong safety from Louisville.
I think that would be a great fit. Also, they're planning on trading Peppers. If they don't trade him, they're planning on cutting him. And
yeah, that's a possibility. Good defensive line, but at this point,
yeah,
do you push for D4 this early? Who kind of doesn't really fit what they're trying to do on defense. But right now on defense, they're just trying to make anything happen. But
right, and then also they lose Major Wright, I believe, also is leaving.
Yeah, Major Wright is leaving. Chris Conte, I'm not the biggest Chris Conte fan.
Yeah, and then I don't think Bears fans are either, giving up the 4th down play to Randall Cobb for the game-winning touchdown for the Packers.
Yeah.
So I think Calvin Pryor is a good fit for them. I think
he actually could help stop the run. You're not going to be able to stop Green Bay everything with just one draft pick, but at this point, it also takes away from one of Green Bay's prized possessions. Maybe they were looking at Calvin Pryor, and right here they'd be able to take Calvin Pryor.
Wait, yeah. So now we go to the 15th pick, which is held by the Pittsburgh Steelers. What are their three biggest needs? What?
Oh, wait. Yeah, you're right. Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, 15th pick. Yeah. So the three biggest needs for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
The Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously, the biggest offensive need it looks like it's probably going to end up having to be tight end, because Heath Miller seems like he's not the same old Heath Miller. He was kind of awful last year, and I fully expect them to let go of him at a point. They're also in need of help in the secondary, cornerback, free safety is also a need, strong safety even, but I don't really think they're going to draft it. They're going to address safety as much, because they did add Shamarico Thomas from Syracuse last year.
And to know, Heath Miller did sign a 3-year contract, and same with Troy Polamalu. They extended them. And Ike
Taylor. Heath Miller?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know.
No, but it's all right. And they also extended Ike Taylor as well.
Yeah,
So
I know. I'm just saying Ike Taylor's a little long
yeah,
in the tooth.
yeah, I know that. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
dependable as
They
much.
extended him. They have veterans on this team, and that's what Pittsburgh does. They keep their veterans long enough for the next guy to teach the guy behind them, and then they finally let go of that guy. I mean, the writing was on the wall for James Harrison. You know, he teaches Jason Worlds. Jason Worlds takes over. Chris Carter probably is going to be fighting out with with the kid Jarvis Jones next year.
Right. Yeah. And
They're
ironically, speaking of the Steelers, they just made a signing. Steelers did sign former Panther safety Mike Mitchell right now.
So that pretty much eliminates what what the
Safety.
what he
Yeah.
was saying as far as safety. I didn't think that they were going to address it in a draft anyways. There was a slight possibility had they not done that, maybe of HaHa Clinton Dix, but probably outside the reach. Probably they were within the reach, but they probably had bigger fish to fry than safety. They also need help at a wide receiver, but I'm hearing a lot of wide receivers here, like Marquise Lee or Brendan Cooks, but those guys are fairly similar to Marcus Wheaton. You addressed Marcus Wheaton in the third round last year, and I think he's capable of starting. I mean, if Antonio Brown, you can get him in the sixth round, and he's capable of winning. I think Marcus Wheaton is capable of breaking through this year.
Yeah, a lot of people had him seeing that's a very underrated pick for the Steelers. I see Marcus Wheaton was good for Oregon State. I see him probably having a breakout year next year, and they did address, wide receiver last year with the loss of Mike Williams to him.
Mike Wallace.
I mean, Mike Wallace, yeah. And so, who do you have them picking here at 15?
At 15 here, I have them taking Eric Ebron, the tight end out of
UNC.
UNC.
He's a very.
Mike, I understand that they re-signed Heath Miller, but I would still probably go Eric Ebron here because Eric Ebron is a younger, more athletic, and just all around just superior weapon. I mean, it addresses that need for Ben Roethlisberger to have that tight end, and he also would have an extra weapon. And it doesn't necessarily even eliminate Heath Miller from being part of the offense because Eric Ebron could line up on the outside.
Exactly.
He could line up in the slot. He could even line up in the backfield from time to time. He's that athletic. He's a real wild card out there. And if you get creative enough, you can use him that way. Or you can just use him up as a traditional inline and tight end as well, just like Heath Miller or Vernon Davis.
Exactly. So now let's go to the Dallas Cowboys, who I've heard got this pick by flipping a coin with the Baltimore Ravens at 16. And what are their three biggest needs? And breaking news today is DeMarcus Ware has been cut from the Cowboys, which I think everybody saw coming because he was not taking a pay cut to stay with the team.
I wouldn't have taken a pay cut to be on the worst defense in the league.
Exactly. So,
I mean, pretty much their need is defense. I mean, we can start from every position and go down. They were awful on the defensive side. They need safeties. They need linebacker. Sean Lee hasn't been able to stay healthy, but Justin Durant didn't show that much promise. Defensive line. I'm looking at the defensive line right now. I mean, like the best defensive lineman you possibly could say that is on that team is George Selvin. He's not starting material either. They don't have a single starter on that defensive line.
Yeah, the one thing watching Cowboys game was like, who are these people playing defensive line for these guys? Like you saw a lot of people, not a lot of big name people besides Hatcher out there and DeMarcus Ware, but he got hurt. So
but even when they were healthy, I mean, like they still needed help out of that defensive line.
Exactly, they were really bad.
And I don't know if Rob Marinelli calling plays is going to be any different from Monty Kiffin calling the plays. In fact, Monty Kiffin knows this defense better than Rob Marinelli.
Yeah, and
I don't think that was an upgrade at all.
Yeah, not to me either. But let's
I mean,
get
their first, their 3 out of their first 4 draft picks should clearly be on that defensive side.
right. I'll be surprised if they go anywhere else, to be honest. But it doesn't surprise me if Jerry Jones does something like that either.
It would really surprise me. Jerry Jones has an understanding of the game somewhat. As much as we don't think that he is, he's been in the game for 20 years. That offense is not the problem. It's been clearly the defense, and it held them back this year tremendously. I mean, you have Tony Romo. You paid him all that much money. You have DeMarco Murray, Des Bryant,
Terrence Williams.
He's coming in. You have a good offensive lineman. You have a Pro Bowl left tackle. You have everything you need on offense. Jason Witten, even though he's getting a little bit older, he's still valuable. You know?
Yeah.
You have all the pieces in the world on offense. You're going to have to address this defense, and it's going to probably have to be done this year. Otherwise, you're going to either be 8-8 or worse, and Cowboy fans can't do that no more.
Oh, no.
Somebody's going to have to go. It's going to have to be Jason Garrett probably who's going to end up having to go. Tony Romo's not going anywhere.
Right. And so, who do you have them taking here at 16?
I have them taking possibly the best defensive player available at this point. And it looks right now, because of the free agency, I didn't necessarily like this now, but I have them taking now Aaron Donald, which makes sense at this point because how bad their defensive line is, and taking the best defensive player possible. He fits into Tampa too as well too, because he is a little bit quicker, he is a little bit more athletic, a John Randall kind. He has the intensity of a John Randall, Leroy Glover. You know, those undersized defensive tackles that's going to penetrate and get to the backfield a little bit quicker than your one gap type of guy. He's probably a 3 technique.
Right. And so that concludes the first half of this draft. And now I'm going to ask you some quick questions. I know this is a little bit surprised, but what is the biggest surprise right now in free agency that you've heard today?
Oh, there's been a lot of them. I guess I would probably say that it'd be Blaine Gabbert getting traded to the 49ers.
Right, and then the ironic of he's getting paid more than Colin Kaepernick there too.
Yeah, it's like, and I guess a lot of people mocked him. Even myself, I think I had a few mock drafts where I had Blaine Gabbert going to San Francisco.
Right.
And now he's going to San Francisco. We're going to see if Jim Harbaugh could get the best out of him.
Right. You know, he goes into a good environment. You know, he's not on a bad team expecting to do anything for that team like he did with Jacksonville. I mean, he has weapons, you know. So if the moment of Colin Kaepernick does go down and get hurt, he does have weapons around him. They run the ball really well. They have a great offensive line there. And they have a great coach in Jim Harbaugh.
And he turned around Alex Smith. Why can't he turn around Blake Gabbert?
Right.
Maybe he's not broken.
Yep, maybe it was just the Jaguars broke him. But
I definitely didn't think that he was ready to play the first year, though. Yeah. There was no way. I don't care what team he was on. I didn't think that he had anything to contribute the first year.
Right, and I thought that was a big surprise, too. That came in within the last probably hour or so. He got traded for a 6th-round pick from the 49ers, which is, you know, the 49ers had no backup quarterback at all.
And they have a million draft picks.
Yeah, so I thought that was the biggest surprise. And my biggest surprise today would probably... There's a lot of things that happened today. Probably, I would say the Blaine Gabbert thing as well. But to me, the Browns doing something right in free agency is a surprise.
Well, they have to be aggressive.
Yeah.
They have all that money, and they have to spend it. The NFL tells you now that you have to spend money.
Yeah, and so the Browns getting Dante Whitner. They also get Carlos Dansby to replace DeQuell Jackson, which is a very good replacement or within that range.
Yeah, which he actually fits a little bit better because DeQuell Jackson, he was good, you know, but he really didn't fit a 3-4 as much as he would have fit a 4-3.
Right. And then
Even
also
though he's going to a 3-4 team again.
the Browns are reportedly trying to get Darrelle Revis, which would be completely deadly of him
Yeah.
and
Now, if that was to happen, that would be my biggest surprise.
right. That would be, I think to me wherever
That's
Darrelle
the biggest news.
if
Yeah,
Darrelle Revis gets traded, I think that would be my biggest surprise, depending on what team.
Depending on what team, yeah.
It would not surprise me if he went to the Patriots. I'll just say, Jets fans, there you go. You got to go burn some more Revis jerseys.
How about him coming back to New York?
Oh yeah, they did. They did cut also Cromartie.
For even less.
Yeah.
New York Jets will feel smarter.
Yeah, but join us next time where we go over the next 8 picks, which is the Baltimore Ravens, the Jets, the Dolphins, the Cardinals, the Green Bay Packers, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Chiefs, right? Chiefs, yeah.
Yes.
That would be it. And one more. And the Cincinnati Bengals. And our third, the 3/4 of part of this draft. And then after that one, we will have the final 8 teams in this draft. And we'll address what their 3 biggest needs, and we'll probably have more reports on free agency, and this list will change even more after that. But until next time, we'll see y'all then.